Hello all, welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be dealing with the topic cognitive psychology. So it is essential to state from the outset that this will not be a passive learning experience. We are here to examine the mind, the brain and complex architecture of thought. This course is designed for advanced learners who are prepared to be interrogated rather than merely lectured at. So we'll be exploring the consistent boundaries and the unresolved mechanisms that defined our field. So these are the very questions that keep cognitive physiology intellectually honest. So when we ask what cognitive physiology actually explains, we must acknowledge the difficulty of our subject matter. The field is defined as the scientific study of mental processes, specifically how people acquire, process, store, and utilize information. The operative word here is unobservable. We cannot directly view perception, memory, reasoning, or consciousness. We must infer their existence and properties from observed behavior and neural signals. This creates a profound tension. Every claim made about constructs like working memory or attention is a theoretical model rather than a directly measured physical object. You cannot articulate what specific evidence would falsify your cognitive mode model. You do not yet fully understand that model. So, to understand where we are, we must look at our history. This field emerged in the mid 20th century as a direct response to behaviorism, which had notoriously refused to theorize about the internal states of the mind. The cognitive revolution triggered a massive paradigm shift, moving the focus away from simple stimulus response chains towards internal representations and computational processes. It is critical to recognize that we borrowed our central metaphor, the mind as an information processor, from the domain of computing, not from the domain of biology. We began our exploration of the five core areas with perception and attention. The fundamental issue here is the bottleneck problem. Sensory input vastly exceeds our brain's processing capacity. The brain receives roughly 11 billion bits per second, but conscious attention can handle approximately 120 bits per second. Attention is the mechanism or perhaps the metaphor that resolves this massive mismatch. We are still debating the nature of this filter. Broadband's early selection model suggests that filtering occurs before any meaning is extracted from the input. Conversely, Dietrich-Normann's late selection models argue that all input is processed for meaning and the selection happens only at the response level. Neither model has been decisively eliminated after 50 years of testing. They both survive by narrowing their claims. This leads to a provocative question. Is this debate empirical or is attention simply not a single unified mechanism? This gap between sensory input and conscious capacity is precisely why inattentional blindness is the rule, not the exception. Next, we examine memory systems. Three stores, one content architecture. Working memory is responsible for the limited capacity maintenance and manipulation of information. However, Baddeley's model includes a central executive component that many critics argue explains nothing, acting as a mere homunculus. Episodic memory involves personally experienced events that are bound to specific times and places. It is important to note that this memory is highly unstable and vulnerable to reconsolidation errors every single time it is retrieved. Semantic memory covers context-free facts and concepts. We know these systems are distinct because they double dissociate in amnesia patients where synaptic memory can survive the profound loss of episodic memory. Here we discuss where psychology meets wetware. We define learning behaviorally as a durable change in knowledge or skill, including synaptic strengthening, pruning, and in specific limited regions neurogenesis is our physical correlate. While the correlation is well established, we lack a causal mechanism level explanation for how any specific learned skill occurs. We must be careful in our educational applications. While evidence-based strategies like space retrieval and interleaving have large replicated effects, we must maintain a distinction between the physiological descriptions and neural descriptions to avoid the risk of neurobranding, which uses neural labels without actual mechanisms. We must address whether structure constrains cognition. The strong Wolffian view, which suggests language determines thought, trapping speakers in different cognitive worlds, is most universally rejected. However, the weak or modern view is that language influences habitual attention and characterization. For example, spatial or cold terms can shift what a speaker notices first without capping what they can eventually perceive or reason about. The field is vital, which is bilingual cognition research utilizes language switching as a natural experiment on executive, language shifting as a natural experiment on executives. Furthermore, if a thought were entirely independent of language, pre-linguistic infants and languages impaired adults would reason identical to fluent adults on matched tasks, but they do not. When analyzing higher order processes, we ask, are we rational actors or predictable deviators? In judgment and decision making under uncertainty, humans rarely follow the axioms of expected utility theory. We utilize heuristics such as availability, representativeness, and anchoring, which produce fast, usually adaptive judgments but also lead to systematic and pre-detectable errors. While dual process occurs such as System 1, System 2 are useful metaphors for teaching. Critics note that the systems are rarely defined with independent false label criteria. A major replication basis find are robust. Many have not yet survived large scale replication, but cutting a blast is an argument. You must ask if it has been independently replicated. How do we know that we claim to know? We must understand the limitations of our methods. Reaction time measures the speed and accuracy of processing steps, but it relies on MRI, measures the blood oxygen level Doppler signal, but it suffers from poor temporal resolution and is default correlational and normal phase. Computational modeling allows for formulated, testable processes theories, but a model that fits behavior is not proof that the mind computes in the specific way. In lesion or neurophysiological studies observe functioning lost their function the functioning has lost in the early stages. So now let's go to the next slide. We must understand cognitive psychology among its neighbors. Cognitive neurosciences is tasked with mapping mental processes into neural substrates, but it relies on cognitive psychology to supply the behavioral phenomena that can then be localized and mechanized. Cognitive science acts as an interdisciplinary umbrella where we combine empirical human performance data alongside computational and philosophical modeling. A, risk, a recurring failure mode is applied in fields like education, clinical intervention, and AI system designing. Is important cognitive findings as mere slogans such as growth mindset or left brain, right brain, often after the original evidence has been qualified or in turn but primary lecturer. So before we conclude, there are four questions you must be able to define it. If we construct like wood working memory capacity is usually examined under it is usually examined under independently of the task used to define it. It is actually explained behavior or just calling it name. When a behavioral affect and its proposal neural collaborate both really which one has explanatory money priority all all kinds of questioning and thus the question which one has explanatory priority and thus the question have a principal answer. Findings you believe have been independently replicated at scale Venus simply reading in textbooks. Why would you be true for your abandoned and favorite cognitive model? And can you name that evidence before you even if you looking it for it? To close, cognitive psychology is not settled science, a live, contested attempt to describe processes that no one see directly using behavior, computation, and neural signal is three imperfect videos into the same hospital. The discipline marries the most romantic the discipline that matters most is the hold where every construct whether it is attention working memory or system one to the same standard of evidence you would demand of a claim outside of psychology. If you require more, I'm available to discuss many memory models, attention theories, or neuroplasticity in greater depth upon request. So that's all for today. Thank you all.